The radio crackled to life at 3:47 hours, cutting through the pre-dawn darkness like a blade through silk. "Command, this is Trident 7. We have a problem." The voice belonged to Lieutenant Commander Marcus Kane, SEAL Team 6's most decorated operator, a man who had never once used the word problem in 23 years of service. The operations center at Naval Air Station Oceana fell silent, 18 sets of eyes fixed on the green glow of communication screens. "Trident 7, this is Overwatch. Report status." Admiral Rebecca Morrison's voice carried the weight of 3 decades in naval aviation, but even she couldn't mask the tension threading through her words. The mission was supposed to be routine: extract a high-value intelligence asset from a compound in the Zagros Mountains, 43 minutes in and out. No complications. No variables. "Ma'am, we've got multiple hostiles converging on our position. Air defense systems online. Iranian Republican Guard, at least 2 full companies. Our egress route is compromised." Kane's breathing was controlled, professional, but the background noise told a different story. Automatic weapons fire peppered his transmission, punctuated by the distinctive whistle of incoming mortars. Morrison's fingers drummed against the tactical display, her mind calculating trajectories, fuel loads, response times. The extraction bird was 40 minutes out, too far to matter. The nearest fast movers were FA-18 Super Hornets from the USS Gerald R. Ford, but their weapons payload would turn the mountainside into a crater, taking Trident 7 with it. "Trident 7, can you reach the secondary LZ?" "Negative, Overwatch. We're pinned down. Recommend abort and extract via alternative means." The words hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. In SEAL parlance, recommend abort meant one thing: they were preparing to die fighting rather than be captured. Morrison's jaw tightened. She had lost too many good operators to ever accept that outcome without exhausting every option. "Trident 7, maintain position. Help is en route." But as she spoke those words, Morrison knew the mathematics were impossible. The closest assets were too heavily armed for precision work in close proximity to friendly forces. The Hornets would flatten everything within a half-mile radius. The extraction helicopters couldn't penetrate the air defense network that had materialized around Kane's position like a steel noose. That's when the anomaly appeared on the radar screen: a single contact, moving fast and low through the mountain passes, electronic signature unlike anything in their database. No transponder code, no flight plan, just a ghost in the machine approaching the combat zone with supernatural precision. The radar operator, Petty Officer 3rd Class Rodriguez, squinted at his screen and spoke the words that would change everything. "Admiral, we have an unidentified aircraft entering the operational area. No radio contact, moving in complete electronic silence." The F-22 Raptor, designated Phantom 77, materialized from the darkness like a predator born from shadow and steel. Its angular surfaces caught no light, absorbed radar waves like a black hole devours starlight. At the controls, Major Evangeline Phoenix Thorne adjusted her night vision display with the practiced efficiency of someone who had danced with death in 17 different countries. Her gloved fingers moved across the cockpit controls with balletic precision, each switch and button an extension of her will. Thorne had been airborne for 14 minutes when the emergency broadcast reached her encrypted frequency. She wasn't supposed to be in Iranian airspace. Hell, she wasn't supposed to be flying at all. 3 weeks earlier, a medical review board had grounded her pending psychological evaluation, following an incident over Syria that had saved 43 Marines, but violated 16 different rules of engagement. The board deemed her unpredictable and prone to excessive risk-taking. They weren't wrong, but they weren't right either. "Phoenix, this is Overwatch. Acknowledge immediately." Admiral Morrison's voice cut through the static, sharp with authority and barely contained fury. "You are not cleared for this airspace. Return to base immediately." Thorne's thumb hovered over the transmit button for 3 heartbeats before she replied. Overwatch, Phoenix 7-7. I have eyes on multiple heat signatures surrounding friendly forces. Request permission to provide close air support. Phoenix, you are grounded. This is a direct order. Return to base. Below, through her targeting pod's infrared display, Thorne could see the tactical situation unfolding like a deadly chess match. 12 American operators pressed against a rocky outcropping, surrounded by nearly 60 Iranian Revolutionary Guards advancing through the terrain with textbook precision. Muzzle flashes strobed in the darkness like deadly fireflies. The SEAL's position would be overrun within minutes. Thorne's aircraft carried a full complement of precision-guided munitions, 4 GBU-39 small-diameter bombs, each capable of surgical strikes with minimal collateral damage. More importantly, her Raptor's advanced sensor suite could distinguish between friendly and hostile forces with pinpoint accuracy, even in complete darkness. Overwatch, Phoenix 7-7. I have positive identification on hostile forces, requesting immediate clearance to engage. Phoenix negative, you are ordered to. Thorne switched off her radio and banked hard left, diving toward the combat zone at 400 knots. Sometimes forgiveness was easier than permission. Sometimes the mathematics of life and death trumped the calculus of military protocol. As her targeting system locked onto the first group of advancing Iranian soldiers, Major Evangeline Thorne prepared to write her name across the night sky in fire and precision-guided justice. The first small-diameter bomb fell from Phoenix 7-7's internal weapons bay at exactly 3:51 hours, its GPS guidance system steering it toward a cluster of Iranian soldiers advancing on the SEAL's eastern flank. The explosion bloomed orange against the mountainside, a perfect flower of destruction that eliminated 6 hostiles without disturbing a single rock near the American position. Thorne's targeting had been surgical, devastating, and impossibly precise. "What the hell was that?" Kane's voice crackled over the radio, tinged with equal parts relief and bewilderment. "Overwatch, did you just drop ordnance danger close to our position?" In the operations center, Admiral Morrison watched the infrared feed from an overhead surveillance drone, her expression cycling through anger, disbelief, and grudging admiration. The unknown aircraft, she now realized it had to be Phoenix, had just executed a precision strike that would have challenged the best pilots in the fleet. And Thorne had done it while flying a grounded aircraft, in violation of direct orders over hostile territory. Trident 7, maintain position. Continue to mark hostile locations. Morrison's voice carried the weight of command, but privately she was calculating the political ramifications of an unauthorized strike on Iranian soil. The mission had just escalated from a simple extraction to a potential international incident. Phoenix 7-7 banked hard right, diving through a narrow canyon that would have intimidated most pilots even in daylight. Thorne's night vision systems painted the rocky walls in ghostly green detail, her aircraft threading the needle between towering stone formations with mere feet to spare on either wingtip. The Raptor's stealth characteristics meant the Iranian air defense systems couldn't track her, but they knew something was up there. Surface-to-air missile batteries were going active across the region, their radar beams sweeping the night sky like searchlights hunting for ghosts. "Phoenix, this is Overwatch." Admiral Morrison's voice carried a different tone now, not anger but cold calculation. "If you're going to disobey orders, at least do it properly. Trident 7 is marking targets with infrared strobes. Paint them." Thorne's lips curved into the first smile she'd worn in 3 weeks. Morrison was giving her unofficial permission to continue the unauthorized mission, which meant the Admiral was willing to risk her own career to save the SEAL team. It was the kind of leadership that reminded Thorne why she dedicated her life to serving in the Navy's most demanding roles. Overwatch, Phoenix copies. I have multiple IR strobes and am establishing target priorities. Through her targeting pod, Thorne could see the Iranian forces repositioning, trying to flank the SEAL's defensive position. Their movements were professional, coordinated, deadly. But they were also predictable to someone who had studied insurgent tactics across 3 different theaters of operation. The second SDB dropped at 3:53 hours, targeting a machine gun nest that was pouring fire onto the SEAL's western perimeter. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard captain crouched behind a boulder, studying the tactical display on his handheld device. His name was Darius Rizzi, a 15-year veteran who had cut his teeth fighting Iraqi forces during the border conflicts of the early 2000s. He understood mountain warfare, understood how to use terrain and superior numbers to overwhelm even elite enemy forces. What he didn't understand was how his carefully coordinated assault was being systematically dismantled by precision strikes that seemed to come from nowhere. "Sir, we've lost contact with 3rd Squad." His lieutenant's voice carried the strain of a man watching his careful plans disintegrate in real time. No enemy aircraft on radar, no sound of engines, no muzzle flashes. It's like the mountain itself is fighting us. Rizzi keyed his radio, switching to the command frequency. "Control, this is Mountain Lion. Request immediate air support. We are taking casualties from unidentified aircraft." The response came back in crisp Farsi. "Mountain Lion negative. No aircraft detected in your operational area. Continue mission." Through his night vision scope, Rizzi watched another of his fire teams disappear in a perfectly placed explosion. The American Special Operations Forces were pinned down, exactly where they were supposed to be, but something was protecting them with surgical precision that bordered on supernatural. He had never seen anything like it in 15 years of combat operations. Above the battlefield, Major Thorne banked her Raptor through another impossible turn, her G-suit inflating to keep blood flowing to her brain as she pulled 6GS in a climbing spiral that would have torn apart lesser aircraft. The F-22's thrust vectoring system allowed her to perform maneuvers that defied conventional aviation wisdom, and she was using every bit of that capability to stay ahead of the Iranian air defense systems that were beginning to focus on her general area. "Phoenix, this is Trident 7 Actual." Kane's voice carried a different quality now, respect earned through shared combat. "Whatever you're flying up there, you just saved our asses. We have a clear path to the secondary LZ, but we're going to need cover for the next 8 minutes. Trident 7 Phoenix copies, you're covered, move when ready." Thorne's 3rd SDB fell at 3:55 hours, eliminating a mortar team that had been adjusting fire toward the SEAL's escape route. The explosion lit up the mountainside for a brief moment, revealing the scope of the Iranian operation. At least 80 soldiers deployed in a coordinated search pattern, with more reinforcements visible in the distance. This wasn't a chance encounter. Someone had set a trap, and Trident 7 had walked right into it. The intelligence asset they'd been sent to extract was either compromised or never existed in the first place. The realization hit Admiral Morrison at the same moment, watching the tactical display from 3,000 miles away. "Phoenix, Overwatch. Be advised this may be a setup. Recommend you egress immediately after Trident 7 reaches extraction point." Lieutenant Commander Kane pressed his back against the rocky outcropping, feeling the mountain's cold stone through his tactical vest. 18 years of special operations had taught him to read the rhythm of combat, to sense when a firefight was turning in his favor or spiraling toward disaster. Right now, for the first time in the past hour, momentum was shifting toward the Americans. The mysterious aircraft providing close air support was a game changer, but Kane couldn't shake the feeling that they were all dancing to someone else's choreography. The Iranian forces had been too well positioned, too ready for their arrival. The intelligence that had led them to this godforsaken mountain pass smelled like week-old fish. "Trident 7-2, this is 7 Actual. What's your assessment of the extraction route?" Kane's voice barely carried over the diminishing gunfire as his team prepared to move. "7 Actual, this is 7-2. Route appears clear for approximately 400 meters, Then we're back in the shit. Multiple heat signatures moving to intercept. Petty Officer First Class Jessica Reaper Martinez had the best eyes in the team, capable of spotting enemy movement through night vision scopes that would challenge most snipers. Kane processed the tactical picture in his head. They could reach the secondary landing zone, but it would be touch and go, and they'd be completely dependent on their guardian angel staying overhead to keep the Iranian forces suppressed. Phoenix Trident 7 Actual. We're beginning movement to extraction point. Request you maintain overwatch. Trident 7 Phoenix copies. I've got eyes on multiple hostile elements moving to intercept your route. We'll engage as needed. Above the battlefield, Major Thorne was fighting her own battle against physics and fuel consumption. The F-22's internal fuel tanks were designed for efficiency, not extended loitering over combat zones. Her fuel gauge showed enough remaining for perhaps 20 more minutes of operations before she'd be forced to break off and find a tanker aircraft, assuming she could locate one without revealing her position to every radar system between Iran and the Arabian Gulf. More concerning was the gradual increase in surface-to-air missile activity. The Iranians might not be able to track her Raptor directly, but they were beginning to triangulate her general operating area through the pattern of her strikes. SAM sites across the region were going active, their radar systems sweeping overlapping sectors of airspace in a coordinated search pattern. Thorne's fourth and final small-diameter bomb dropped at 3:57 hours, targeting a squad of Iranian soldiers who had positioned themselves to ambush the SEALs along their escape route. The explosion echoed off the mountain walls like thunder, marking the end of her precision-guided munitions. From this point forward, she'd be limited to her 20 cannon and whatever psychological effect her continued presence might have on enemy forces. Overwatch Phoenix, Winchester on guided munitions, switching to guns only. Admiral Morrison's response carried the weight of command decision. Phoenix, recommend you return to base. You've done enough. But Thorne was already diving toward the next cluster of Iranian forces, her targeting computer calculating gun solutions for strafing runs that would require split-second precision to avoid hitting friendly forces. Sometimes, enough wasn't actually enough. The sound that echoed across the mountainside defied easy description. Part whistle, part roar, part mechanical scream that spoke of violence moving at supersonic speeds. Major Thorne's F-22 Raptor dove through the night air at 450 knots, its 20 mm 61A2 Vulcan cannon spitting 6,000 rounds per minute in precise 3-second bursts that turned Iranian soldiers into memories and rock formations into clouds of dust and shrapnel. The strafing run was surgical poetry written in tracer fire and high-explosive rounds. Thorne's aircraft carved a deadly arc across the battlefield, her cannon fire walking through enemy positions with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. The psychological effect was immediate and devastating. Soldiers who had been advancing with disciplined coordination suddenly broke cover, some retreating to defensive positions, others simply freezing in place as the sound of death passed overhead. Jesus Christ! The exclamation came from Petty Officer Martinez, watching through her night vision scope as the enemy forces that had been preparing to flank their escape route simply evaporated under the aerial assault. That pilot just bought us a clear path to the LZ. Lieutenant Commander Kane was already moving, his team flowing across the rocky terrain with the fluid efficiency that marked truly elite operators. They had perhaps 3 minutes before the Iranian forces reorganized, 3 minutes to cover 400 meters of exposed ground while carrying a wounded teammate who had taken shrapnel from an earlier mortar blast. Trident 7 Phoenix, you have approximately 2 minutes of clear passage before hostiles regroup. I'm Winchester on 20 as well. This is my last pass. The words carried an unspoken message that Kane understood perfectly. The mysterious pilot had expended all available ammunition protecting his team. From this point forward, they were on their own. Phoenix Trident 7 Actual, we copy. Thanks for the guardian angel routine. Who the hell are you? There was a pause in the radio transmission, just long enough for Kane to wonder if the pilot would answer. When the response came, it carried a quality he hadn't expected, vulnerability mixed with determination. Trident 7, call me Phoenix. That's all you need to know. But Admiral Morrison, listening to the exchange from 3,000 miles away, knew exactly who Phoenix was. Major Evangeline Thorne, daughter of a Marine colonel and a Navy test pilot, graduate of the Top Gun program with scores that had never been equaled, holder of the Distinguished Flying Cross for actions over Afghanistan that remained classified to this day. The same Major Thorne who had been grounded for excessive risk-taking, after saving 43 Marines by deliberately flying her aircraft through a surface-to-air missile engagement zone that no sane pilot would have attempted. The same Major Thorne who was about to become either a national hero or the center of an international incident that could destabilize the entire Middle East. The extraction helicopter materialized from the darkness like a metal angel, its rotors chopping through the thin mountain air as it settled onto the rocky landing zone, with the controlled violence that marked all military aviation. The MH-60M Black Hawk's crew chief was already motioning for the SEAL team to board before the aircraft had fully touched down, his night vision goggles scanning the surrounding terrain for threats that might materialize from the shadows. Lieutenant Commander Kane counted his team as they sprinted across the final 50 meters to the helicopter. 11 men moving with the desperate efficiency of operators who understood that extraction windows measured in seconds, not minutes. The wounded teammate, Petty Officer Second Class David "Tank" Thompson, was conscious, but losing blood despite the field dressing wrapped around his left thigh. He'd need immediate medical attention once they reached the USS Gerald R. Ford. Trident 7 aboard, Kane reported as the last operator dove through the helicopter's door. We're clean. The Black Hawk lifted off immediately, its pilots pulling pitch and banking hard toward the south, using the mountain terrain to mask their departure from Iranian radar systems. Within 60 seconds, they were racing through valleys and canyons at speeds that would have terrified civilian passengers, the aircraft's terrain-following radar keeping them mere feet above the rocky ground. Above the extraction zone, Major Thorne watched the helicopter disappear into the darkness before beginning her own egress from Iranian airspace. Her fuel situation was approaching critical, enough remaining for perhaps 12 minutes of flight time before she'd be forced to find a tanker aircraft or attempt an emergency landing at a friendly airfield. The nearest available fuel was from a C-130 stratotanker orbiting over the Arabian Gulf, approximately 40 minutes away at her current fuel consumption rate. The mathematics were impossible, but Thorne had made a career of solving impossible equations. She pushed her throttles forward and pointed her aircraft toward the south, climbing to 35,000 feet, where the thinner air would allow more efficient fuel consumption. The F-22's sophisticated flight management system calculated a dozen different flight profiles, each one ending with her aircraft running out of fuel somewhere over the Persian Gulf. Phoenix, this is Overwatch. Admiral Morrison's voice carried the weight of someone who had just watched an unauthorized mission save 12 American lives. What's your fuel state? Overwatch, Phoenix. Approximately 10 minutes at current consumption. I'm declaring an emergency and requesting immediate tanker support. There was a pause before Morrison responded, and Thorne could almost hear the Admiral calculating political ramifications, career consequences, and diplomatic fallout. Finally, Phoenix, vector to Angels 25, heading 180, Texaco 57 will be waiting. The relief in Thorne's voice was audible. Overwatch, Phoenix copies, Angels 25 heading 180. As her aircraft climbed toward the rendezvous altitude, Thorne allowed herself a moment to process what had just happened. She had violated direct orders, penetrated hostile airspace, and engaged enemy forces without authorization. By any reasonable standard, her military career was over. But 12 American operators were alive because of her decisions. The KC-135 Stratotanker emerged from the darkness like a mechanical whale, its massive airframe silhouetted against the star-filled sky as Major Thorne approached the aerial refueling rendezvous point. The tanker's boom operator had already extended the refueling probe, waiting for the F-22 to move into position behind the larger aircraft's wing vortex, a delicate dance that required precision flying in conditions that challenged even experienced pilots. Phoenix, this is Texaco 57. You're cleared to per-contact position. We show you at minimum fuel. Thorne eased her Raptor into the precise position 60 feet behind the KC-135's tail, her aircraft buffeted by the tanker's wake turbulence as she fought to maintain exact alignment with the refueling boom. The procedure required her to fly formation with the larger aircraft while simultaneously maneuvering her fuel receptacle into contact with the boom's nozzle, all while traveling at 300 knots, 35,000 feet above the Persian Gulf, in complete darkness. Texaco 57, Phoenix in per-contact, ready for fuel. The boom operator, Staff Sergeant Michael Chen, had performed this procedure thousands of times, but never with an aircraft that officially didn't exist in the current airspace. His orders had been explicit: fuel the F-22, ask no questions, report nothing beyond the standard refueling log entry. Someone with significant authority had made this tanker available, and Chen had learned not to question decisions that came from admirals and above. Phoenix contact. The boom locked into the F-22's fuel receptacle with the solid thunk of metal engaging metal, and jet fuel began flowing from the KC-135's tanks into the Raptor's depleted fuel cells. Showing good flow, Phoenix. You'll be topped off in approximately 12 minutes. For the first time in an hour, Thorne allowed her shoulders to relax slightly. The immediate crisis was over. She had enough fuel to return to base, and the SEAL team was safely aboard their extraction helicopter, racing toward the medical facilities of the USS Gerald R. Ford. But she knew the larger storm was just beginning. Phoenix, this is Overwatch. Admiral Morrison's voice carried a different quality now, not the operational commander managing a tactical situation, but the senior officer who would soon be required to explain why an unauthorized strike had occurred in Iranian airspace. Upon completion of refueling, you are directed to return to Naval Air Station Oceana. You will report directly to my office upon landing. Overwatch, Phoenix copies. Return to Oceana, report to Admiral Morrison upon landing. The fuel transfer completed without incident, and Thorne separated from the tanker with the practiced efficiency of someone who had performed aerial refueling operations in combat zones across 3 different continents. As her F-22 banked toward the west, heading for the long flight back to Virginia, she began mentally preparing for what would likely be the most important conversation of her military career. Behind her, in the mountains of Iran, Captain Darius Rizzi was writing his own report, trying to explain how a carefully planned ambush had been thwarted by an aircraft that appeared on no radar screen and left no electronic signature beyond the precision-guided destruction it had delivered. The dawn sky over Naval Air Station Oceana painted itself in shades of gold and crimson as Major Evangeline Thorne taxied her F-22 Raptor toward the maintenance hangar that had been her aircraft's home for the past 18 months. Ground crew personnel moved with purposeful efficiency around the stealth fighter, their faces carefully neutral despite the fact that everyone on the flight line knew the aircraft wasn't supposed to have been airborne. News traveled fast in the tight-knit community of naval aviation, and word of an unauthorized combat mission had already spread through the squadrons like wildfire. Thorne completed her post-flight checklist with mechanical precision, each switch and circuit breaker positioned according to procedures she could perform blindfolded. The familiar routine provided a moment of calm before the storm she knew was waiting in Admiral Morrison's office. Her hands moved across the cockpit controls without conscious thought muscle memory built through thousands of hours of flight time guiding her through the shutdown sequence. As she climbed down from the cockpit, Master Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez approached with the studied neutrality of a senior enlisted man who had learned to navigate the complex politics of military aviation. "Ma'am, Admiral Morrison requests your immediate presence in her office. Building 7, second floor." "Thank you, Master Chief." Thorne's voice carried the controlled calm of someone who had spent the past 4 hours dancing with death and was now preparing to face the equally dangerous world of military bureaucracy. "Is there any word on the status of Trident 7? Rodriguez allowed himself a slight smile. "All personnel accounted for and aboard the Ford, ma'am. One minor casualty, stable condition. They're calling it a textbook extraction." The walk to Admiral Morrison's office gave Thorne 12 minutes to consider her options, none of which were particularly appealing. She could claim mechanical malfunction had forced her to divert into Iranian airspace, a lie that would be exposed within hours when investigators examined her aircraft's flight data recorders. She could cite emergency assistance to forces in contact, technically true, but insufficient justification for the cascade of regulations she had violated. Or she could tell the truth and accept the consequences. Admiral Rebecca Morrison's office occupied a corner of Building 7 that commanded an impressive view of the flight line, where FA-18 Super Hornets and EA-18G Growlers sat in neat rows like sleeping predators. Morrison herself stood with her back to the door as Thorne entered, studying a tactical display that showed the previous night's operation in precise detail. Every aircraft movement, every radio transmission, every bomb impact had been recorded and analyzed by intelligence specialists who were still trying to understand how 12 SEALs had escaped from an impossible tactical situation. "Major Thorne reporting as ordered, ma'am." Thorne's voice carried the crisp formality of military protocol, but both women understood that the next few minutes would determine whether she remained in the Navy or became a civilian by the end of the week. Morrison turned from the display, her expression unreadable. "Major, in 34 years of naval service, I have never encountered a more flagrant violation of orders, regulations, and common sense. You deliberately disobeyed direct commands, penetrated hostile airspace without authorization, and engaged enemy forces while flying an aircraft you had been explicitly ordered not to operate." Thorne stood at attention, her gaze fixed on a point somewhere above Morrison's left shoulder. "Yes, ma'am. You also saved the lives of 12 American servicemen who would otherwise be dead or captured." Admiral Morrison moved to her desk and opened a classified folder that contained Major Thorne's complete service record. 18 years of exemplary performance marked by consistent excellence and an uncomfortable tendency to ignore regulations when they conflicted with mission accomplishment. The file read like a case study in the tension between military discipline and warrior spirit, filled with commendations for heroism and reprimands for insubordination in roughly equal measure. "Major, help me understand something." Morrison's voice carried the measured tone of a senior officer who had learned to navigate the complex politics of military justice. 3 weeks ago, you were grounded for psychological evaluation following your actions over Syria. The reviewing board concluded that you demonstrate poor judgment and excessive risk-taking behavior. Yet last night, your poor judgment and excessive risk-taking saved 12 lives. How do I reconcile those facts? Thorne's eyes remained fixed on the wall behind Morrison's desk, but her voice carried conviction. "Ma'am, the board was correct in their assessment. I do take excessive risks. I do demonstrate poor judgment according to standard military doctrine. But sometimes standard military doctrine doesn't account for the reality of combat situations where good people are about to die." That's exactly the kind of thinking that concerns the review board, Major. Military discipline exists for a reason. Chain of command exists for a reason. When individual officers decide they know better than their superiors, the entire structure of military authority breaks down. Morrison walked to the window overlooking the flight line, where maintenance crews were already preparing aircraft for the day's training missions. The morning briefings would include discussion of the previous night's events, sanitized versions that omitted the unauthorized nature of Thorne's mission, but emphasized the tactical lessons learned. In a few hours, every pilot on the base would know that someone had pulled off an impossible rescue mission, even if they never learned the pilot's identity. On the other hand, Morrison continued, the preliminary reports from Trident 7 are extraordinary. Lieutenant Commander Kane specifically requested that I pass along his team's gratitude to whoever the hell was flying that ghost aircraft. His exact words, Major. For the first time since entering the office, Thorne allowed herself to meet Morrison's gaze directly. Ma'am, those men were going to die. I had the capability to prevent that outcome. The choice seemed obvious. The choice was obvious to you, Major. But what about the international implications? What about the risk to other missions? What about the precedent you've set for other pilots who might decide their personal judgment supersedes military authority? Morrison returned to her desk and removed a second folder from the classified materials. This one marked with the red striped cover that indicated eyes-only distribution at the highest levels of command. The contents represented 48 hours of diplomatic activity that had begun the moment the first unauthorized bomb impact was detected in Iranian territory. I've spent the past 6 hours on secure telephone calls with the Pentagon, the State Department, and the White House. There are people in those buildings who want your head on a platter, Major. They're talking about court-martial, reduction in rank, possible criminal charges for violation of international law. The weight of potential consequences settled around Thorne like a lead blanket, but she remained at attention, waiting for the other shoe to drop. In the calculus of military justice, intent mattered less than outcome, and the outcome of her unauthorized mission had international ramifications that extended far beyond the lives of 12 SEALs. However, Morrison continued, there are also people in those same buildings who understand the value of what you accomplished last night. The intelligence asset that Trident 7 was attempting to extract turned out to be a fabrication. The entire mission was a trap designed to capture or kill American Special Operations Forces. Your intervention not only saved those men, but also prevented a significant intelligence coup for Iranian forces. Admiral Morrison opened the red-striped folder and extracted a single sheet of paper bearing the official letterhead of the Department of the Navy. The document represented the culmination of 18 hours of negotiations between competing bureaucratic interests, each with their own interpretation of how military justice should be applied to Major Thorne's unauthorized mission. Major, you have 3 options. Morrison's voice carried the flat authority of someone delivering non-negotiable terms. Option 1. Accept a general court-martial for violation of direct orders, conduct prejudicial to good order and discipline, and unauthorized military action in foreign airspace. The convening authority estimates a high probability of conviction, with sentences ranging from dismissal from service to possible confinement. Thorne's expression remained impassive, but her hands tightened slightly behind her back. A general court-martial would not only end her military career, but potentially result in federal criminal charges that could follow her for the rest of her life. Option 2. Accept non-judicial punishment under Article 15 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Reduction in rank to captain, forfeiture of 2 months' pay, and transfer to a non-flying position within Naval Air Systems Command. Your security clearance would be suspended pending a new evaluation, effectively ending your career as a tactical aviator. The second option was marginally better than the first, but both represented the end of everything Thorne had worked toward since graduating from the Naval Academy 18 years earlier. Flying wasn't just her profession, it was the core of her identity, the thing that defined who she was and how she contributed to the world. Option 3, Morrison continued, requires your agreement to several non-negotiable conditions. You will undergo a comprehensive psychological evaluation by a board of 3 military psychiatrists. You will complete anger management counseling. You will accept assignment as an instructor pilot at the Navy's Test Pilot School, where your unique approach to problem solving can be channeled into advancing naval aviation technology rather than violating international law. Morrison paused, studying Thorne's reaction to the unexpected third alternative. Additionally, you will never speak publicly about the events of last night. You will submit to regular psychological evaluations for the remainder of your career, and you will accept that any future violation of orders, no matter how minor, will result in immediate dismissal from service. The offer was unprecedented, a face-saving compromise that recognized both the value of Thorne's actions and the necessity of maintaining military discipline. Test Pilot School was actually a promotion in terms of prestige and career development, even if it removed her from frontline combat operations. Ma'am, may I ask why option 3 exists? Morrison smiled for the first time since Thorne had entered her office. Because Lieutenant Commander Kane made a very compelling argument about the value of having pilots who can think outside established doctrine when American lives are at stake. He also pointed out that the only reason his team survived was because someone was willing to violate orders to do the right thing. She closed the folder and leaned back in her chair. Major, I need your decision within the next hour. The Secretary of the Navy is expecting my recommendation before noon. Major Thorne stood in the hallway outside Admiral Morrison's office, her mind processing the 3 options with the analytical precision that had made her one of the Navy's most effective tactical aviators. Through the window at the end of the corridor, she could see FA-18 Super Hornets launching for their morning training missions, their afterburners painting brief orange flowers against the blue Virginia sky. Option 1 meant disgrace, court-martial, and the end of her military career in the most public and humiliating way possible. Option 2 represented a slower death, the gradual suffocation of her professional identity as she transitioned from tactical aviator to desk-bound administrator. Option 3 offered an unexpected lifeline, but came with constraints that would fundamentally change how she approached every decision for the remainder of her career. The test pilot program was actually prestigious, an assignment that many pilots spent years trying to obtain. The Navy's most advanced experimental aircraft, cutting-edge technologies, and the opportunity to shape the future of naval aviation. Under normal circumstances, she would have considered it a significant career advancement. But these weren't normal circumstances. The assignment came with permanent psychological oversight, regular evaluations, and the understanding that she would be watched closely for any sign of the excessive risk-taking that had both saved 12 lives and violated a dozen regulations.
Sir,